Bonanza, a series centered on the Cartwright family at the Ponderosa Ranch, captivated millions of viewers with its family bonds and thrilling adventures. But behind the spotlight, many of its stars hid horrifying secrets, addiction, shocking affairs, and all of them ultimately faced lonely, haunting deaths you would never believe. Let's explore and pay tribute to the legacies they left behind. Let's dive in. Michael Landon as Little Joe Cartwright. Michael Landon was born on October 31, 1936, in Forest Hills, New York. When he was only 22 years old, he blazed onto the screen with the role of Little Joe Cartwright in Bonanza, the legendary Western of the 1960s. His character, a romantic yet honorable cowboy, quickly won the hearts of audiences and made Landon one of the most prominent American television icons. However, behind that handsome image, Michael Landon carried wounds that could not heal. His childhood passed in fear as his mentally ill mother repeatedly attempted suicide right in front of her son, leaving young Eugene with lifelong trauma. Those scars forged in Landon a powerful desire for control, both in his career and personal life. He married 3 times and had 9 children, yet his marriages were never peaceful. His second marriage collapsed in bitterness with accusations of manipulation and psychological abuse, along with a public affair with a young makeup artist, Cindy Clerico, right on the set of Little House on the Prairie, which rocked Landon's reputation. His chaotic private life deepened conflicts with many colleagues. Landon was considered patriarchal, authoritarian, eager to hold absolute power on set, and willing to push aside anyone who opposed him. That pressure led him into a spiral of painkillers and sleeping pills to suppress migraines and chronic anxiety. Outwardly, he still appeared with a warm smile, but inside, Landon struggled with shadows unseen by most viewers. On July 1, 1991, Michael Landon passed away at his home in Malibu, California, at 54 years old, after a short and brutal battle with late-stage pancreatic cancer. At the time of his death, Landon's net worth was estimated at around $40 million USD, equivalent to nearly $90 million USD as of 2025, thanks to shrewd investments and enormous income from the legendary television series he once owned. Lorne Greene as Ben Cartwright. Lorne Greene was born on February 12, 1915, in Ottawa, Canada. When he was 44 years old, he made an immortal mark by portraying Ben Cartwright, the exemplary father in Bonanza, a Western series that ran for 14 years and became an American cultural monument. With his deep, warm voice, commanding yet loving presence, Greene made audiences believe Ben Cartwright was the embodiment of family values, responsibility, and integrity. However, behind that calm exterior, Lorne Greene's personal life was filled with silent conflicts. He married Rita Hands for the first time in 1938 and had twin children born in 1944, but this marriage ended after more than 20 years together. Later, Greene remarried Nancy Teal in 1961 and had another child with her. But even this marriage could not escape distance when Greene was frequently away from home for work, leading to rumors of affairs circulating in the entertainment world. Though he maintained the image of a devoted husband, many colleagues said he rarely shared deeply with his wife and children, creating a lasting emotional gap. Besides marital fractures, Greene also endured the insecurities of a late immigrant entering Hollywood. He once modified his voice to erase its Canadian accent, always striving to prove he deserved his star status in a harsh industry. On the Bonanza set, Greene was known to be serious but often requested script changes, leading to power struggles with writers and directors. In terms of health, he lived with stomach ulcers and anxiety for years, but kept it hidden to preserve Ben Cartwright's strong image in the public eye. On September 11, 1987, Lorne Greene passed away at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, at 72 years old, after complications from pneumonia related to stomach ulcer surgery. His assets at the time of death were estimated at around $10 million USD, coming from enormous earnings from Bonanza, voiceover projects, and real estate in Los Angeles. Dan Blocker as Hos Cartwright. Dan Blocker was born on December 10, 1928, in DeKalb, Texas. When he was 31 years old, he shot to fame as Eric Hos Cartwright, the big-hearted, burly cowboy in Bonanza, one of the longest-running and most successful series in American television history. The image of Hos, with his sincere smile and warm but clumsy presence, entered the hearts of millions of viewers throughout 415 episodes, making Blocker an irreplaceable icon of the Western genre on television. Off the set, Dan Blocker's life was no less difficult. Growing up during the Great Depression, Blocker had to overcome a poor childhood and feelings of shame about his large frame, which often made him the target of teasing and bullying, leaving him with lifelong psychological scars. Later, even with success in football and acting, Blocker still struggled with anxiety and health problems linked to his weight, and sometimes drank alcohol to mask his emotional pain. In 1969, a lawsuit accused him of assaulting a colleague while drunk, shaking the friendly image of Hos, though the case ended outside of court. Dan Blocker married Dolphia Parker, whom he met during college, and they had 4 children together: 2 sons, Dirk and David, and twin daughters, Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn. However, his dense filming schedule and promotional tours kept him away from home frequently, creating silent cracks in his marriage, along with rumors that Blocker had fallen into extramarital affairs more than once. On May 13, 1972, Dan Blocker died suddenly in Los Angeles at 43 years old from a pulmonary embolism following what was thought to be a routine gallbladder surgery, leaving a huge void in the hearts of viewers and the Bonanza crew. At the time of his death, Blocker's assets were estimated at about $5 million USD, thanks to his shares in the Bonanza Steakhouse's restaurant chain and real estate in Los Angeles. Pernell Roberts as Adam Cartwright. Pernell Roberts was born on May 18, 1928, in Waycross, Georgia. When he turned 31 years old, he became Adam Cartwright, the intelligent, refined eldest son in Bonanza, the legendary Western series that left a deep mark throughout the 1960s. With his masculine voice, stern demeanor, and contemplative gaze, Roberts portrayed Adam as a gentleman scholar, standing out next to the more straightforward brothers of the Cartwright family, winning over audiences through each episode filled with the Western spirit. However, Pernell Roberts always carried deep regrets. Growing up with a father who was an alcoholic and often abusive, Roberts developed feelings of inferiority early on and became determined to break free from the shadow of the poor, rural South, striving to remake himself as an educated intellectual with a passion for theater. His frustration with the formulaic, shallow scripts of Bonanza led to fierce conflicts with producers, as he called the show cultural manure, and left the series for good in 1965. That decision made Hollywood wary, and Roberts was labeled difficult to work with, forcing him to return to theater to find creative freedom at the cost of years of a stalled career. Roberts's personal life was also filled with turmoil. He married 4 times, with his first wife being Vera Mowry, a theater professor, and they had a son together, Jonathan. But the marriage ended bitterly, and Roberts lost custody of his child. Jonathan later died in a motorcycle accident in 1989, a shock that Roberts never overcame. His next marriages to Judith Anna Lebrecht and then Cara Nack also fell apart, before he married Eleanor Criswell, who stayed by his side until the end of his life. In his older years, Roberts lived quietly, sometimes retreating into mountain cabins, drinking, and was rumored to have many short-lived romances with younger co-stars. On January 24, 2010, Pernell Roberts passed away at 81 years old from pancreatic cancer in Malibu, closing a life of brilliant talent, yet loneliness and deep regret. Roberts's assets at the time of death were estimated at about $10 million USD, thanks to successful roles, advertising contracts, and a valuable rare book collection. David Canary as Candy Canaday. David Canary was born on August 25, 1938 in Elwood, Indiana. When he was 29 years old, he appeared in Bonanza as Canary, the young and chivalrous ranch foreman who brought a fresh breeze to a Western series already deeply familiar to audiences. With his athletic build and classically trained opera voice, Canary turned Candy into a heroic, sincere, and likable figure, yet still strong on screen during the 1960s. However, behind the stage lights, David Canary carried many insecurities on his shoulders. Growing up in a strict family, Canary was once teased for his high singing voice and quiet nature, which made him always crave a chance to prove himself. Although he achieved glory with All My Children, winning 5 Emmy Awards, Canary was still troubled by the feeling of being typecast into roles of powerful managers or scheming villains. After being cut from the shortlist for the role of Spock in Star Trek, he fell into a confidence crisis that haunted him for many years, convinced he was not good enough to break through. His marriage to actress Maureen Maloney was also full of difficulties. Though they had 2 children together, Chris and Kate, yet their relationship stood on the verge of collapse many times because Canary was so absorbed in his career and frequently absent, leaving a great emptiness in his children's hearts. With his first wife, Julie M. Anderson, Canary had a daughter named Lisa, but their quick breakup left him with endless regret. In his later years, he had to battle dementia, along with a laryngeal injury that took away the voice he had once been so proud of. David Canary passed away on November 16, 2015, at 77 years old, in a nursing home in Wilton, Connecticut. His assets at the time of death were estimated at about $5 million USD, mainly from royalties of long-running television series and real estate in Connecticut. Victor Sen Young as Hop Singh. Victor Sen Young, birth name Victor Chung Young, was born in 1915 in San Francisco. When he was 44 years old, he joined Bonanza as Hop Singh, the quick-witted and devoted cook of the Cartwright family, leaving a deep impression in the hearts of Western-loving audiences. But behind the laughter brought by Hop Singh, Victor Sen Young carried a deeply wounded heart. As an Asian American in a Hollywood full of prejudice, he was repeatedly typecast in roles such as servants or restaurant workers and struggled to find his place. His life grew even darker in 1972 when Victor was shot during an airplane hijacking, a trauma that caused him to withdraw, turn down many acting offers, and shift to making a living through ceramics. In his final years, Victor lived alone in a small apartment in North Hollywood, almost never appearing before the public again. He never married, had no children, and maintained only a narrow circle of social contacts through selling ceramics and a few cooking shows. For a time, he was invited to fairs or Bonanza fan gatherings, but then gradually disappeared in the indifference of a film industry to which he had devoted so much. In 1980, his body was found in his apartment, which reeked of gas, after he had died silently of gas poisoning nearly 10 days earlier. His assets at death were estimated at less than $1 million USD, a modest sum for someone who had appeared in more than 160 films, reflecting the harsh reality of Hollywood's spotlight for Asian American actors like him. Ray Teal as Sheriff Roy Coffey. Ray Elgin Teal was born on January 12, 1902, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. When he took on the role of Sheriff Roy Coffey in Bonanza in 1960, he was 58 years old, bringing to life the image of a calm, kind-hearted lawman in the turbulent town of Virginia City. Across 98 episodes, Teal etched into viewers' memories the portrait of a model sheriff, chivalrous and full of compassion. Behind the silver screen glory, Ray Teal carried wounds that were hard to heal from a harsh childhood. Growing up with an alcoholic and violent father, he learned early how to endure and steel himself to survive. Teal's married life was also turbulent. He went through 3 marriages, 2 of which ended in bitter divorces with accusations of infidelity and emotional abuse. His relationship with his only son grew cold, as the boy grew up in the shadow of a father who was controlling and struggled with alcoholism. At the height of his acting career, Ray Teal silently suffered from chronic arthritis, along with cirrhosis caused by alcohol. The pressure of the industry and the feeling of being overlooked, with more than 250 films but never being given a leading role, made him famous for being hot-tempered and often threatening young actors on set. In 1974, a passion project in directing failed disastrously, leaving him with a huge debt and a nearly broken spirit. In his final years, Teal lived quietly in a house in the San Fernando Valley, alone and full of regret. On April 2, 1976, Ray Teal died at 74 years old, with the cause recorded as natural causes. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, resting among many Hollywood stars. Teal's assets at death were estimated at about $2 million USD, including real estate in San Fernando and a collection of rare antique firearms. Bing Russell as Deputy Clem Foster. Neil Oliver Bing Russell was born on May 5, 1926, in Brattleboro, Vermont. When he began playing Deputy Clem Foster in Bonanza in 1961, he was 35 years old, bringing to life an image of a just, approachable lawman with a strong community spirit. Across nearly 60 episodes, Bing Russell built a supporting character of great substance, closely tied to the legendary Virginia City. After the spotlight of Bonanza, Bing Russell entered a family life filled with ups and downs. He married Louise "Lulu" Crone in 1946, sharing life and 4 children with her, including the famous actor Kurt Russell. Their marriage weathered hidden storms, as Bing was rumored to have had affairs and became distant from his son for a time due to work pressures and disagreements over parenting. Still, they stayed together until the end. Russell also carried a deep regret over a lonely childhood, having run away from home at a young age and giving up his sports dreams after a knee injury during adolescence, then pouring all his passion into film and baseball. Bing Russell was never afraid to break the rules. The clearest proof was owning the Portland Mavericks baseball team, where he boldly rejected all commercial sponsorships and opened the gates for any player to come try out. It was a rebellious spirit, almost defiant of the entertainment machine that he believed silenced actors like himself. He bitterly admitted he had been blacklisted by Hollywood for his opposing political views since the 1950s, and he carried lifelong regret over never getting a worthy lead role. In his final years, Bing lived almost reclusively, surrounded only by old film reels and baseball memorabilia, searching for the memories of past glories. Bing Russell died on April 8, 2003 in Thousand Oaks, California, at 76 years old after a battle with cancer. His body was cremated, and the ashes were returned to the family to be kept alongside the Portland Mavericks baseball artifacts. Bing's assets at the time of death were estimated at about $2 million USD, mainly from film royalties and ownership of valuable baseball archives. Phil Chambers as Abe. Horace Phillip. Phil Chambers was born on June 16, 1916 in Los Angeles, California. When he stepped onto the screen as Abe in Bonanza in 1962, he was 46 years old. Although only appearing as a supporting character, Phil Chambers still impressed viewers with the image of a diligent, quiet, and kind-hearted Western townsman, serving as a solid backdrop for the main storylines to shine. His career was largely tied to similar roles, portraying the working-class people of old America. But behind the camera, Phil Chambers' life was far from peaceful. Growing up in a poor family in Los Angeles, with a father who abandoned them when he was still a child, young Phil had to witness his mother exhausting herself as a janitor to feed her children. His alcoholic and abusive stepfather pushed Phil into a childhood full of fear, making him cautious and slow to trust others. After World War II, where he had served and brought home many psychological scars, Chambers refused all help and buried his war trauma deep inside. This unintentionally led to unpredictable fits of anger, which ended up destroying his marriage to actress Hella McKay, who could no longer tolerate his coldness and indifference. Phil Chambers took his last breath on January 16, 1993 in Los Angeles at 76 years old. His estate was estimated at under $1 million USD, mostly consisting of a small savings account and some film royalties. Robert Fulk as Deputy Sheriff Clem and Seth. Robert Castleberry Fulk was born on May 5, 1908, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He joined the world of Bonanza in 1960 when he was 52 years old, playing Deputy Sheriff Clem and Seth, the image of a wise, calm, and somewhat stern sheriff. He was remembered by audiences as a trusted face of the West, helping to maintain order amid gunfights and chaos. Robert Fulk's steady yet powerful presence etched itself into fans' hearts, even though he was only a modest link in Bonanza's large cast. Yet behind the spotlight, Robert Fulk's life was a journey of contradictions. Coming from a strict family with a father who considered emotions a weakness and constantly imposed his will, Fulk grew up with a suppressed, guarded mindset and lacked trust in others. He once had a taste of Broadway and worked with the legendary director George Abbott, but he never got a leading role, a deep wound that he carried throughout his career. It was said that he often criticized colleagues, especially actors from the method acting school, which caused many Hollywood producers to distance themselves from him. His marriage to actress Barbara Slater, his second wife, was said to be more functional than loving, a sort of unspoken contract to maintain the image of a perfect family in a conservative industry. Robert had a daughter, but there were constant rumors about his private life, even hinting at unspoken sexual orientations that surrounded him. Fulk often tried to escape the pressures of Hollywood by returning to architecture and designing houses as a way to heal and find himself again, but he never fully broke free from the shadow of depression. Robert Fulk died on February 25, 1989, in Los Angeles, at 80 years old, from chronic heart disease that he had neglected while busy acting. He was buried at Green Hills Memorial Park in Rancho Palos Verdes, in the quiet reflection garden, without any grand memorial, true to the reserved nature he had kept throughout his life. His assets at the time of death were estimated at about $2 million USD, mainly from real estate, architectural projects, and film royalties. Lane Bradford as Buck and Charlie. Lane Bradford, whose real name was John Mertland LeVar Jr., was born on August 29, 1922, in Philadelphia. He joined Bonanza in 1959 when he was 37 years old, taking on villainous roles like Buck or Charlie, outlaws who were ruthless yet irresistibly captivating for audiences. With his steely gaze and rugged build, Lane Bradford made any episode he appeared in tense and filled with the scent of gunpowder. But in real life, Bradford carried a darkness no less grim than his on-screen characters. As the son of actor John Merton, he grew up in a cold household, emotionally abused by his father and pressured to follow in his footsteps in show business. Lane became rebellious, eager to prove himself, and willingly performed his own stunts to the point that, in 1961, an on-set accident left him with a serious spinal injury. Suffering from chronic pain, he turned to painkillers and eventually became addicted to barbiturates. Bradford's life spiraled further downward when, in 1968, he sued Universal Studios for wrongful termination, but the case failed and left him virtually blacklisted from Hollywood contracts. Bradford's private life was equally turbulent. 2 marriages, first to Nancy Gray and then to Claire Larkin, both ended bitterly with accusations of violence and infidelity. In his later years, he tried to revive his career with an independent film project, but it failed disastrously. Relatives recalled that in 1972, Bradford was hospitalized for exhaustion, which was actually a mental breakdown as he tried, in vain, to quit sleeping pills. Lane Bradford died on June 6, 1973, in Honolulu, at 50 years old, from a brain hemorrhage after a stroke in the hotel room where he had been negotiating a comeback project. His body was cremated in Hawaii as per his wishes, closing the chapter on a life full of ups and downs, of a man passionate about film but ultimately devoured by Hollywood itself. His estate was estimated at only about $1 million USD, but most of it had been consumed by medical debts and legal fees. Roy Engel as Dr. Paul Martin. Roy Engel, born Leroy Englewood Stultz Jr., came into the world on September 13, 1913 in Missouri. He stepped into Bonanza in 1959 when he was 46 years old, portraying Dr. Paul Martin, a dedicated, calm doctor always ready to help the Cartwright family through illnesses and injuries. Engel's image in a white doctor's coat, with kind eyes, became a familiar sight to audiences throughout many seasons. But beyond the screen, Roy Engel's life was filled with uncertainty. Born during the chaotic era of the Great Depression, abandoned by his father, and raised by a mother who struggled to provide, Engel learned from a young age to swallow his tears and hide his sadness behind a composed exterior. Even though he once made a mark on radio with Sky King, he was bitter after the leading role was pulled from him at the last minute, pushing Engel to be typecast in supporting roles in the eyes of film studios. Behind the scenes, Engel often quietly drank in his trailer, whispering complaints about Hollywood, which he saw as only exploiting second-tier actors like him. Roy Engel's marriage was no smoother. His wife, a beautiful former dancer, grew weary of moving from film set to film set, and eventually left him in the late 1960s, taking their daughter Royan with her. From then on, Engel lived almost alone, comforted only by an old radio and backstage photographs. On winter nights, he would often sit alone, sipping alcohol, reminiscing about his glorious youth. Roy Engel died on December 29, 1980, at St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank, at 67 years old, from complications of meningitis after a prolonged cold. It was estimated that Roy Engel's estate was worth barely under $1 million USD, consisting of a small house and a modest pension. The tragedies of the Bonanza stars are not only stories of fame, but also reminders of the price of the spotlight. From addiction, scandals, to haunting deaths, they left behind legacies that were both dazzling and sorrowful. Who do you think might be the next star with a tragic fate? Share your thoughts and keep exploring the unexpected stories of Hollywood.